Good evening, everyone, and welcome to The Droning Professor. Tonight we're going to learn about why we're drawn to ruins. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. So, as you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from, and feel free to subscribe. Before we begin tonight's lecture, I want you to imagine something. Picture yourself standing before the Colosseum in Rome, its weathered arches reaching toward the sky like stone fingers grasping at history. Or perhaps you're wandering through the overgrown temples of Angkor Wat, where massive stone faces emerge from jungle vines like ancient gods playing hide-and-seek with time itself. Now, here's my question. Why are you there? What compelled you, or millions of others, to travel thousands of miles, pay entrance fees, and spend precious vacation days staring at, well, essentially broken buildings? This morning, we're going to explore one of humanity's most enduring obsessions, our inexplicable, almost magnetic attraction to ruins. It's a phenomenon so universal that it transcends culture, class, and century, yet so complex that it touches on everything from evolutionary psychology to postmodern philosophy. And yes, before you ask, this will be on the exam. Let's start with a fundamental observation. Humans are probably the only species that actively seeks out decay for pleasure. You don't see lions making pilgrimages to abandoned gazelle bones, and I'm fairly certain dolphins don't organize tours of sunken ships for the aesthetic experience. Yet here we are, a species that has turned rubbernecking at ancient disasters into a multi-billion-dollar industry we call tourism. The statistics are staggering. The Colosseum receives over 6 million visitors annually. Machu Picchu hosts nearly 1.5 million tourists each year, despite being accessible only by train, bus, or a challenging 4-day hike. Pompeii, a city that met its end in quite literally the worst possible way, attracts 2.3 million visitors who pay to walk through what is essentially a massive crime scene preserved in volcanic ash. But our attraction to ruins isn't just modern tourism driven by Instagram opportunities and bucket lists. Historical evidence shows that humans have been drawn to ruins for millennia. The Romans were tourists at Egyptian monuments that were already ancient to them. Medieval pilgrims detoured to see the ruins of biblical cities. Even our ancestors seem to understand that there was something compelling about places where grandeur had given way to grass growing between stones. Consider the English concept of the picturesque ruin that emerged in the 18th century. Wealthy landowners actually built fake ruins on their estates, artificial crumbling towers, and deliberately broken bridges, because authentic decay was considered essential to a properly romantic landscape. Think about that for a moment. People with enough money to build anything they wanted chose to build things that looked broken. If that's not a testament to our deep psychological relationship with ruins, I don't know what is. So what's happening in our minds when we encounter ruins? The psychological literature suggests several interconnected processes at work, and I promise this will be more interesting than your standard psychology textbook. First, there's what some scholars call temporal vertigo, that dizzying sense of deep time that overcomes us when confronted with structures that have outlasted dozens of human generations. Standing in the Forum Romanum, you're not just looking at old stones. You're experiencing a form of time travel that makes you simultaneously feel connected to history and utterly insignificant in its sweep. This connects to Edmund Burke's concept of the sublime, developed in the 18th century. Burke argued that we're drawn to experiences that combine beauty with a hint of terror or overwhelming scale. Ruins perfectly embody this concept. They're beautiful in their decay, yet they remind us of the fundamental impermanence of all human achievement. They're sublime in the truest sense, too vast, too ancient, too loaded with meaning for our minds to fully process. Dr. Sarah Dillon at Cambridge University has written extensively on what she calls ruins consciousness, the particular state of mind that occurs when we encounter these temporal disruptions. According to her research, ruins force us into a unique psychological state where past, present, and future collapse into a single, overwhelming moment of awareness. From a psychological perspective, Ruins also trigger what terror management theorists call mortality salience, an acute awareness of our own mortality. Normally, we spend considerable psychological energy avoiding thoughts about death and impermanence, but ruins make such avoidance impossible. Their massive memento mori, whispering, "Remember, you too shall pass," in a language of crumbling stone and twisted metal. Interestingly, research by Dr. Mark Landau at the University of Kansas suggests that this mortality salience doesn't typically cause distress when experienced in the context of ruins. Instead, it often produces what he calls meaning-making behavior, a heightened sense of connection to something larger than ourselves, whether that's history, humanity, or the cosmic order. There's also what I like to call the cognitive archaeology aspect of ruin exploration. When we encounter ruins, our brains automatically begin reconstructing what once was. We can't help but populate empty halls with imagined figures, rebuild collapsed walls in our minds, and resurrect the daily life that once animated these spaces. This mental reconstruction is deeply satisfying on a cognitive level. It engages our pattern recognition systems, our spatial reasoning abilities, and our capacity for historical empathy all simultaneously. In essence, exploring ruins turns us all into amateur archaeologists, detectives, and time travelers, roles that tap into fundamental human cognitive pleasures. Now, let's zoom out from individual psychology to examine how different cultures have understood and related to ruins throughout history. The 18th and 19th centuries saw ruins elevated to high art through the Romantic movement. Poets like Lord Byron made careers out of brooding among Greek temples, while painters like Caspar David Friedrich depicted solitary figures contemplating ruined abbeys in misty landscapes that practically defined the aesthetic of melancholy. The Romantics saw ruins as superior to intact buildings, because decay had stripped away human pretension, leaving only essential truth. A perfect cathedral was artificial, they argued, but a ruined cathedral had been refined by time and weather into something more honest and therefore more beautiful. This was a radical inversion of classical aesthetics, which privileged completion and perfection. Percy Bysshe Shelley's sonnet Ozymandias perfectly captures this romantic sensibility. "Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of that colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away." The poem finds profound beauty and meaning in the complete failure of human ambition, a perspective that would have been incomprehensible to the pharaoh who commissioned that original statue. Eastern philosophical traditions offer different but equally rich perspectives on ruins and decay. Buddhist and Hindu concepts of impermanence, anicca in Buddhism, or the endless cycles of creation and destruction in Hinduism, provide frameworks for understanding ruins not as failures but as natural expressions of cosmic order. The Japanese aesthetic concept of mono no aware, often translated as the pathos of things, finds beauty specifically in transience and decay. This sensibility helped shape the Japanese appreciation for ruins, though it's worth noting that traditional Japanese architecture, being primarily wooden, doesn't create the same kind of permanent ruins as stone-based Western architecture. In Japanese culture, the famous Ginkakuji or silver pavilion in Kyoto was never actually covered in silver as originally planned. Rather than seeing this as incomplete, Japanese aesthetics found the weathered wood and unfulfilled intention more beautiful than any perfect silver covering could have been. Indigenous cultures around the world offer yet another lens through which to understand our relationship with ruins. Many Native American tribes, for example, view abandoned settlements not as dead relics, but as places where the spirits of ancestors continue to dwell. These sites require respectful interaction rather than casual tourism. The Hopi concept of Hisat, roughly translated as long ago or ancient times, suggests that abandoned places exist in a different temporal framework, neither fully past nor present, but occupying a liminal space that requires careful navigation. This perspective challenges Western notions of ruins as purely historical objects, suggesting instead that they remain active participants in an ongoing spiritual landscape. Let's turn now to the visual and aesthetic dimensions of our attraction to ruins. What is it about the look of decay that we find so compelling? From a purely visual standpoint, ruins often achieve a kind of accidental beauty that surpasses their original design. The Parthenon, impressive as it must have been when complete, arguably reaches its aesthetic peak in its current ruined state. The broken columns and scattered stones create sightlines and spatial relationships that the original architects never intended, but that our eyes find more compelling than the perfect symmetry they originally achieved. This is entropy as artist. Physical decay follows laws of probability and physics that create patterns humans find naturally beautiful. The golden ratio appears in the way vines grow over walls. Fractal patterns emerge in the way stone weathers, and the interplay of light and shadow through broken roofs creates effects no architect could deliberately design. There's something deeply appealing about patina, the surface changes that occur as materials age and weather. The green copper oxidation on old roofs, the way marble softens and rounds under centuries of rain, the rich browns and golds that iron develops as it rusts. These are changes that only time can create, and they carry an authenticity that new materials simply cannot achieve. Walter Benjamin wrote about the aura of authentic objects, their unique presence that emerges from their particular history and cannot be reproduced. Patina is aura made visible. It's the visual proof of an object's journey through time, its encounters with weather and human hands and historical moments. Many ruins achieve their most memorable effects through accident. The way a tree has grown through the roof of an abandoned church, creating a living vault more beautiful than any stone architecture. The manner in which a partially collapsed wall frames a distant landscape in ways the original builders never intended. The bird's nest tucked into a carved saint's outstretched hand, creating a juxtaposition between human artistry and natural adaptation that speaks to something profound about continuity and change. These accidental compositions often surpass deliberate design because they emerge from the intersection of human intention, natural processes, and chance, a collaboration between multiple forms of intelligence that no single architect could orchestrate. Our cultural fascination with ruins has generated an enormous body of literature, film, and artistic work. Let's examine how ruins function as more than just settings. They become characters, symbols, and entire worldviews. Gothic literature practically invented the ruined castle as a character in its own right. In Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto from 1764, the castle's crumbling walls and mysterious passages aren't just backdrop. They're active participants in the supernatural events that unfold. The building's decay mirrors and amplifies the moral decay of its inhabitants. More recently, authors like J.G. Ballard have explored ruins of modernity, abandoned high-rises, defunct shopping centers, obsolete infrastructure. In High Rise from 1975, Ballard presents a newly constructed apartment building that rapidly descends into ruin and savagery, suggesting that contemporary architecture might be generating its own forms of Gothic decay. The post-apocalyptic genre has made ruins central to its aesthetic and thematic concerns. From The Road by Cormac McCarthy to the Fallout video game series, contemporary culture seems increasingly fascinated by imagining our own civilization as future ruins. Film has perhaps done more than any other medium to shape our contemporary understanding of ruins. The opening sequence of Raiders of the Lost Ark turned jungle-covered temples into the quintessential adventure setting, while Blade Runner imagined the ruins of the future as a blend of high-tech decay and ancient architectural forms. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has made a specialty of spectacular destruction, turning the creation of ruins into entertainment spectacle. Yet these films also grapple with serious questions about rebuilding, responsibility, and the emotional weight of destroyed places. More artistic films like Andrei Tarkovsky's Stalker or Werner Herzog's Heart of Glass use ruined landscapes to explore philosophical questions about meaning, memory, and human nature. The internet age has created entirely new categories of ruins: dead websites, abandoned online games, defunct social media platforms. These digital ruins raise fascinating questions about permanence and memory in virtual spaces. The concept of link rot, the gradual breakdown of connections between web pages, creates a form of digital decay that mirrors physical ruination. Urban exploration communities have emerged around documenting abandoned places before they're demolished or renovated. Photography projects like Ghosts of Detroit or Abandoned America create archives of contemporary ruins, turning decay into art and social commentary. Now let's address some more complex questions about our relationship with ruins, because not all of our attractions to these places are benign or uncomplicated. Modern heritage tourism has turned ruins into products, complete with gift shops, audio guides, and carefully managed visitor experiences. This commercialization raises important questions about authenticity and access. When does preservation become performance? How do we balance protection of historical sites with public access? Consider Machu Picchu, which now requires advance reservations and limits daily visitors to protect the site from damage caused by too much human attention. The very popularity that ensures funding for preservation threatens the thing being preserved, a paradox that affects ruins around the world. We must also acknowledge that much ruin tourism carries the legacy of colonial attitudes toward other cultures. European and American visitors often approach ruins in Asia, Africa, and Latin America with assumptions about lost civilizations and mysterious ancients that reflect more about the visitor's prejudices than about the historical realities of these sites. Many sites that appear ruined to Western visitors are actually still active religious or cultural centers for local communities. The temples of Angkor Wat continue to serve as places of worship for Buddhists and Hindus, but tourist management often treats them as historical museums rather than living spiritual sites. The infrastructure required to make ruins accessible to mass tourism, roads, parking lots, visitor centers, hotels, often damages the very landscapes that make these sites meaningful. The irony is profound. Our desire to experience the sublime intersection of human culture and natural reclamation requires industrial development that destroys both cultural and natural authenticity. New technologies are creating interesting alternatives to physical tourism. Virtual reality reconstructions of Pompeii or digital walkthroughs of inaccessible archaeological sites offer ways to experience ruins without contributing to their physical degradation. Yet many argue that these digital experiences, however sophisticated, cannot replicate the embodied multisensory encounter that makes ruins psychologically powerful. Let's return to psychological questions, but now with a focus on what ruins do for us, what psychological and emotional functions they serve in human life. Ruins often serve as sites for processing collective historical trauma. The preserved ruins of Hiroshima, the maintenance of concentration camp sites, the decision to leave Ground Zero as memorial space. These choices reflect a recognition that some ruins serve essential psychological functions for communities and societies. These sites help societies work through collective memories of violence, loss, and disruption. They provide spaces where the past remains present, where abstract historical knowledge becomes concrete, embodied experience. Ruins also provide rare opportunities for contemplating questions of scale and significance that contemporary life often obscures. In our daily experience, we're surrounded by the immediate and the urgent. Ruins force us into relationship with the vast and the enduring. Standing in the baths of Caracalla in Rome, you're confronted with the reality that someone 1,800 years ago conceived and built something intended to last forever, and that their conception of forever has largely been vindicated, while our own ambitious projects seem ephemeral by comparison. Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield has written about ruins as natural monasteries, places where the impermanence that Buddhist philosophy teaches becomes viscerally evident. For people struggling with attachment, loss, or the anxiety that comes from trying to make permanent what is naturally transient, ruins provide powerful lessons in acceptance and letting go. This isn't necessarily a religious or spiritual function. Secular visitors often report similar experiences of perspective shift and emotional release when encountering ruins. There's something therapeutically powerful about being reminded that even the most impressive human achievements eventually return to Earth. Finally, ruins stimulate imagination in ways that complete, functioning buildings cannot. A perfect cathedral tells you exactly what it is and how you're supposed to experience it. A ruined cathedral invites you to participate in its completion, to imagine the missing pieces, to populate the empty spaces with your own understanding of what might have been. This collaborative aspect of experiencing ruins, the way they require our imaginative participation, makes them powerful creative catalysts. Many artists, writers, and thinkers report that ruins help them access creative states by breaking down the boundaries between what is and what might be. As we near the end of our exploration, let's consider what our current relationship with ruins might tell us about our own moment in history, and what kinds of ruins we're currently creating for future generations to contemplate. The deindustrialization of the American Midwest and similar processes worldwide have created vast landscapes of industrial ruins, abandoned factories, empty shopping malls, defunct auto plants. These sites challenge traditional notions of what constitutes historically significant ruins worthy of preservation or aesthetic contemplation. Detroit has become a particular focus for discussions about contemporary ruins. The city's abandoned buildings have been simultaneously seen as symbols of American decline, opportunities for urban renewal, subjects for artistic exploration, and examples of environmental racism. The complexity of these interpretations suggests that our relationship with contemporary ruins is still evolving. Climate change is creating new categories of ruins as sea level rise, extreme weather, and shifting agricultural zones render some human settlements uninhabitable. The Marshall Islands, Venice, and low-lying areas of Miami represent different types of slow-motion ruination that challenge our assumptions about permanence and adaptation. These contemporary processes of ruination are happening fast enough that we can observe them in real time, rather than discovering them as historical artifacts. This creates new psychological and ethical relationships to decay and abandonment. As mentioned earlier, the digital age creates its own forms of ruins. Dead social media platforms, abandoned online games, defunct websites. These virtual ruins raise interesting questions about memory, preservation, and the nature of place in digital environments. Some scholars argue that digital ruins might be more psychologically significant than physical ones for future generations, since digital spaces often contain more intimate records of personal and collective life than physical architecture ever did. The existence of nuclear waste that will remain dangerous for thousands of years creates a new category of ruins, sites that will need to warn future civilizations about invisible dangers long after our languages and cultures have changed beyond recognition. The waste isolation pilot plant in New Mexico and similar facilities represent humanity's first serious attempt to create monuments designed to last longer than any previous human construction. These sites invert the traditional relationship between ruins and attraction. They're explicitly designed to repel future humans rather than draw them in. As we conclude our exploration, let's consider some of the broader philosophical questions that our attraction to ruins raises. Ruins force us to confront fundamental questions about the nature of time and the significance of human action within temporal scales that dwarf individual life. If even the greatest human achievements eventually crumble, what does that mean for how we should understand our own activities and ambitions? Different philosophical traditions offer different answers to this question. Existentialists might find in ruins a confirmation that we must create meaning in the face of ultimate meaninglessness. Stoics might see them as reminders to focus on what we can control, rather than outcomes beyond our influence. Religious traditions might interpret them as pointing toward transcendent values that outlast material accomplishment. Our attraction to ruins also challenges Western philosophical traditions that have often equated beauty with perfection, completion, and ideal form. The Japanese aesthetic of wabi-sabi, which finds beauty specifically in imperfection and impermanence, offers an alternative framework that helps explain why we might find ruins more beautiful than the perfect buildings they once were. This has implications beyond aesthetics. If we can find beauty in decay and incompletion, what does that suggest about how we might approach aging, failure, and loss in our own lives? Finally, ruins raise complex questions about memory and forgetting, both individual and collective. Should we preserve everything? Is forgetting sometimes necessary for psychological health? How do we decide which ruins deserve maintenance and which should be allowed to return to Earth? These questions become practically urgent as climate change and resource constraints force difficult choices about what aspects of our built environment we can maintain and what we must abandon. So, we return to where we began. Why are people drawn to ruins? The answer, as you've probably gathered by now, is not simple. We're drawn to ruins because they satisfy multiple psychological, aesthetic, spiritual, and intellectual needs simultaneously. They provide opportunities for temporal vertigo and sublime experience. They offer spaces for processing mortality and impermanence. They stimulate imagination and creativity. They connect us to history while helping us contemplate the future. They teach lessons about the relationship between human ambition and natural processes. But perhaps most fundamentally, we're drawn to ruins because they help us practice being human in the fullest sense. Beings who exist in time, who create and lose, who build and watch our buildings crumble, who find beauty in imperfection and meaning in impermanence. Our attraction to ruins might be seen as a form of psychological preparation for our own eventual ruin. Not in a morbid sense, but in the sense that learning to find beauty and meaning in decay helps us develop the emotional and intellectual resources we need to navigate our own experiences of loss, aging, and ultimately death. In the end, we are drawn to ruins because we ourselves are ruins in process, temporary arrangements of matter and energy that will eventually return to simpler forms. Ruins show us what that process looks like when it happens to the greatest human achievements, and they suggest that this process can be not just acceptable, but beautiful. Next week, we'll be exploring how different cultures approach the preservation versus natural decay of historical sites, with particular attention to the Ship of Theseus paradox as it applies to archaeological restoration. Good night. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Droning Professor. Tonight we're going to learn about the secrets beneath subway tunnels. So, as you make yourselves comfortable, please take a moment to let us know where you're listening from and feel free to subscribe. Now, as always, take a moment for some deep breaths, letting your mind and body relax for a good night of sleep. Before we begin tonight's lesson, I want you to think about your morning commute. How many of you took the subway to get here? Right, about half of you. Now, as you were sitting there, probably scrolling through your phones or trying not to make eye contact with strangers, did you ever wonder what lies just beyond those tunnel walls? What secrets are hidden mere feet from where you sat, completely oblivious to the underground world surrounding you? Tonight, we're going to explore the secrets beneath subway tunnels, and I promise you, by the end of this lesson, your next subway ride will never feel the same again. When most people think about cities, they imagine the vertical landscape, skyscrapers reaching toward the sky, bustling streets, the horizontal sprawl of neighborhoods. But every major city has a secret twin, an underground doppelganger that exists in the spaces between, beneath, and around our subway systems. This subterranean world is filled with abandoned stations, forgotten infrastructure, hidden communities, and mysteries that would make even the most creative fiction writer jealous. The average subway system is far more than just tunnels and trains. In New York City alone, the Metropolitan Transportation Authority oversees 472 stations, connected by 665 miles of track. But here's the kicker. That's just what they tell you about. The reality is that beneath our feet lies a complex network of abandoned tunnels, sealed-off stations, utility corridors, and spaces that exist in a legal and social gray area that most city officials would prefer you never think about. Let's start with something that sounds like it belongs in a horror movie but is actually a fascinating piece of urban archaeology. Ghost stations. These are subway stops that once served passengers but have been abandoned, sealed off, or simply forgotten by time and urban planning. New York City has some of the most famous ghost stations in the world. The crown jewel is the original City Hall station, built in 1904 as the southern terminal of the first subway line. This station wasn't just functional, it was beautiful, designed by the architectural firm Hines and Lafarge, with elaborate tile work, arched ceilings, and skylights that brought natural light underground. The station featured Guastavino tile vaulting, colored glass, and brass fixtures that made it more like an underground cathedral than a utilitarian transport hub. But here's where urban planning meets tragedy. The platform was built on a curve that couldn't accommodate the longer trains that came into service in the 1940s. Rather than renovate, the city simply closed the station in 1945. For decades, it sat in darkness, known only to transit workers and urban explorers brave enough to venture into the forbidden tunnels. Today, the New York Transit Museum occasionally runs tours through the City Hall station, and I highly recommend you take one if you get the chance. It's like stepping into a time capsule where you can almost hear the echoes of passengers from nearly a century ago. But City Hall isn't alone. New York has at least 20 other ghost stations, including the 18th Street station on the East Side IRT line, closed in 1948, and the Worth Street station, which served passengers for only 36 years before being abandoned in 1940. These stations exist in a kind of temporal limbo, preserved but purposeless, like underground monuments to urban evolution. If New York is impressive, London's ghost stations are legendary. The London Underground, or the Tube as locals call it, has over 40 abandoned stations scattered throughout its network. Some were casualties of war, others victims of poor planning or changing demographics. Take Down Street Station, for example. This station has a history that reads like a spy novel. Built in 1907, it served the affluent Mayfair area until it was closed in 1932 due to low ridership. But here's where it gets interesting. During World War II, the British government secretly converted the abandoned platform into the Railway Executive Committee's wartime bunker. The station became a nerve center for coordinating Britain's railway system during the Blitz, hidden beneath the streets of London while bombs fell overhead. Or consider Aldwych Station, which closed in 1994 and has since become one of London's most famous film locations. You've probably seen it in movies like V for Vendetta, 28 Days Later, and Sherlock Holmes, A Game of Shadows, without even realizing it. The station's authentic 1900s architecture makes it perfect for period pieces, and its abandoned atmosphere is ideal for post-apocalyptic scenes. There's something profoundly unsettling about these ghost stations. They represent urban dreams deferred, plans that didn't work out, communities that moved on. Walking through them, legally of course, is like experiencing urban archaeology in real time. The advertising posters fade and peel, the tiles crack and stain, and nature slowly reclaims these human-made spaces. But they also represent possibility. Some cities have found creative ways to repurpose their underground ghosts. Paris converted its Bastille station into a venue for cultural events. Madrid turned part of its abandoned Chambéry station into a museum. These transformations show us that urban death doesn't have to be permanent. Sometimes spaces just need to wait for their second act. Beneath subway tunnels lies a vast network of infrastructure that keeps cities functioning, and most of it is completely invisible to daily commuters. This underground web includes everything from utility tunnels to storm drainage systems, and it's far more extensive and complex than most people realize. Every major city deals with what urban planners call the utility challenge. How do you route water, gas, electricity, telecommunications, and sewage through a dense urban environment without everything interfering with everything else? The answer increasingly is to go underground and coordinate with subway construction. In Manhattan, for instance, there are over 100 utility companies operating underground infrastructure. Con Edison alone maintains more than 94,000 miles of underground cable, enough to circle the Earth nearly 4 times. These cables run through dedicated utility tunnels that parallel subway lines, creating a hidden circulatory system that keeps the city alive. But here's where it gets really interesting. Much of this infrastructure was built decades or even centuries ago, and the maps aren't always accurate. I'm not kidding. There are utility tunnels beneath New York that appear on no official city plans. They were built by long-defunct companies, forgotten during municipal reorganizations, or simply never properly documented in the first place. This creates what urban explorers call orphan infrastructure, tunnels and passages that technically exist but have no official owner or purpose. Some of these spaces have been colonized by homeless communities, others by artists, and still others remain completely empty, waiting like underground time capsules for someone to rediscover them. One of New York's best-kept infrastructure secrets is its steam system. Con Edison operates the largest commercial steam system in the United States, delivering steam heat to more than 1,700 buildings in Manhattan through a network of underground pipes that dates back to 1882. This system runs through its own dedicated tunnels, many of which intersect with or run parallel to subway tunnels. The result is a maze of interconnected underground passages that most New Yorkers never see but depend on every day. Those mysterious clouds of smoke you see rising from manholes in winter, that's not pollution. It's excess steam venting from this underground heating network. Perhaps no infrastructure is more critical or more secretively managed than urban water systems. Most major cities route their water supply through massive underground aqueducts and tunnels, many of which run near or intersect with subway systems. New York's water system is particularly impressive and secretive. The city gets its water from upstate reservoirs through a system of tunnels and aqueducts, including the Delaware Aqueduct, which runs 85 miles underground and can carry 590 million gallons per day. This tunnel is so large you could drive a truck through it, and it passes directly beneath the Hudson River. But here's the secret part. The exact locations of many of these water tunnels are classified information. The city worries about terrorism, contamination, and system vulnerabilities. So the maps showing where these tunnels run relative to subway infrastructure are restricted to only the highest levels of city government and utility management. This creates an interesting paradox. Subway construction crews sometimes discover water tunnels they didn't know existed, and water department crews occasionally break into subway tunnels while doing maintenance. It's like urban planning by archaeological surprise. Now we come to perhaps the most fascinating and complex aspect of subway tunnel secrets: the people who actually live in these spaces. Yes, I'm talking about underground communities, not just homeless individuals seeking temporary shelter, but organized societies with their own rules, economies, and social structures. Let's address the elephant in the room first. Many of you have probably heard stories about mole people living in subway tunnels, communities of people who have supposedly never seen sunlight and have adapted to permanent underground life. This is largely urban legend, popularized by sensationalistic journalism and Hollywood movies. However, the reality is actually more interesting than the myth. There are indeed people who live long-term in subway tunnel systems, but they're not some separate subspecies of humanity. They're typically individuals who have fallen through society's safety net and have found ways to create livable spaces in the forgotten corners of urban infrastructure. In the 1980s and 1990s, several hundred people lived in the abandoned railroad tunnels beneath Riverside Park on Manhattan's Upper West Side. This wasn't random squatting. It was an organized community with leaders, rules, and systems for maintaining order and safety. The most famous resident was a man who went by Lord Cataract, who became a kind of unofficial mayor of the tunnel community. Residents built elaborate living spaces using scavenged materials, ran electricity from above-ground sources, and even created gardens using artificial lighting systems. They had a mail system, a rudimentary medical clinic, and committees that resolved disputes and enforced community standards. This community was eventually cleared out in the 1990s, but it represented something unprecedented in urban sociology. a functioning alternative society existing entirely within abandoned infrastructure. It challenged assumptions about homelessness, community formation, and the possibilities for human adaptation to extreme environments. London has its own history of underground communities, though they've tended to be more temporary and crisis-driven. During the Blitz in World War II, thousands of Londoners essentially moved underground, using subway stations as bomb shelters night after night. What started as emergency shelter evolved into underground communities with their own social norms, entertainment systems, and governance structures. People claimed regular sleeping spots, organized group activities, and even held underground concerts and theatrical performances. Some stations became like underground villages, complete with libraries, first aid stations, and communal cooking areas. While this was officially temporary, many people found that underground life offered a sense of community and safety they hadn't experienced above ground. Some continued to spend nights underground even after the bombing stopped, reluctant to give up the social connections they'd formed in the tunnels. Today's underground communities are different but no less fascinating. Urban exploration, the hobby of exploring man-made structures and abandoned places, has created informal networks of people who know subway systems better than most transit employees. These communities operate through online forums, social media groups, and word-of-mouth networks. They share maps, coordinate group explorations, and maintain detailed databases of abandoned stations, utility tunnels, and other underground spaces. While most urban explorers don't live underground, they've created detailed knowledge archives about spaces that exist outside official city planning. Some of these explorers have discovered spaces that had been completely forgotten by city authorities. In 2010, urban explorers in Brooklyn found a beautifully preserved 1930s subway station that didn't appear on any current transit maps. The station still had its original tile work, vintage advertisements, and Art Deco fixtures intact. Living in or exploring subway tunnels isn't just illegal, it's genuinely dangerous. These spaces weren't designed for human habitation, and they contain numerous hazards: electrified third rails, moving trains, poor air quality, structural instability, and lack of emergency access. But the people who choose underground life aren't necessarily making irrational decisions. For individuals experiencing homelessness, mental illness, or addiction, tunnel communities can offer safety, stability, and social connection that's unavailable in traditional shelters or on the streets. This creates complex ethical questions for city authorities. Clearing tunnel communities often disperses people back onto the streets without addressing the underlying problems that drove them underground in the first place. But allowing unofficial communities to develop in dangerous infrastructure creates liability and safety concerns. Here's where our story takes a turn toward the genuinely classified and occasionally paranoid-inducing. Subway systems in major cities aren't just transportation networks. They're also strategic infrastructure that governments have adapted for military and civil defense purposes. Most major world capitals have classified or restricted subway lines that don't appear on public maps. These systems allow government officials to travel securely during emergencies, connecting key facilities like military headquarters, intelligence agencies, and emergency command centers. Moscow's Metro 2 is probably the most famous example. This parallel subway system, officially known as D6, was built during the Soviet era to connect the Kremlin with important government and military facilities. The system allegedly includes connections to underground bunkers, the Federal Security Service headquarters, and the Moscow airport. While the Russian government has never officially confirmed Metro 2's existence, construction workers, urban explorers, and intelligence defectors have provided enough consistent accounts that most experts believe it's real. Estimates suggest the system includes at least 3 lines and dozens of stations, making it potentially larger than many cities' entire public transit systems. The Washington metro system has its own classified elements, though the U.S. government is typically more subtle about these things than the Soviets were. Several metro stations have ghost platforms, additional levels or platforms that don't appear on public maps and aren't accessible to regular passengers. The Pentagon Metro Station, for instance, is rumored to have classified levels that connect directly to secure areas within the Defense Department. Similarly, several downtown D.C. stations allegedly have restricted access points that lead to government buildings through underground passages. During major security events, like presidential inaugurations or international summits, certain metro stations become temporarily restricted or are used exclusively for security personnel transport. These occasions offer brief glimpses into infrastructure that exists primarily for emergency and security purposes. London's experience during World War II created some of the most extensive military adaptations of subway infrastructure in history. Beyond the famous use of stations as bomb shelters, the British government converted large sections of the underground for classified military purposes. The Churchill War Rooms, now a museum, represent only a small fraction of London's wartime underground network. The government created secure communication centers, ammunition storage facilities, and alternative command posts throughout the underground system. Some of these facilities remained classified and operational well into the Cold War period. Down Street Station, which I mentioned earlier, wasn't the only abandoned station converted for military use. The government also adapted parts of the unused Central London Railway tunnels, created secure document storage facilities in disused passages, and established alternative power and communication systems that could keep government functioning, even during sustained bombing campaigns. The Cold War era saw massive expansion of underground government facilities, many of which connected to or were built in conjunction with subway systems. The logic was simple. If nuclear war broke out, government operations would need to continue underground, and existing subway infrastructure provided a head start on this kind of construction. In the United States, the continuity of government program created classified underground facilities near major cities, with some connected to subway systems through secret passages. While most details remain classified, occasional government document releases and investigative journalism have revealed that these facilities were far more extensive than most people realize. The Greenbrier Bunker in West Virginia, built to house Congress during nuclear war, is the most famous example that's been declassified. But urban historians believe similar facilities exist near most major American cities, often with connections to subway infrastructure that could facilitate emergency evacuation of key government personnel. Today's subway security involves infrastructure and procedures that passengers never see. Most major transit systems have their own police forces, classified security protocols, and surveillance systems that extend far beyond the visible cameras in stations and trains. After September 11, 2001, American subway systems implemented extensive but largely invisible security upgrades. These include chemical and biological agent detection systems, classified communication networks for emergency response, and restricted access tunnels that allow security personnel to move through systems without using public areas. The New York subway system, for instance, has its own counter-terrorism unit that maintains detailed maps of the entire system, including abandoned stations and utility tunnels. This unit works with federal agencies to monitor potential threats and has access to areas of the system that regular transit workers never see. One of the most exciting aspects of subway construction is what archaeologists call accidental discovery. When you dig deep holes in cities that have been continuously occupied for centuries or millennia, you inevitably uncover pieces of the past that have been buried, forgotten, or lost to history. London Underground construction has revealed some of the city's darkest historical secrets. During the expansion of the Central Line in the 1990s, construction workers discovered several plague pits, mass graves from the Black Death pandemic of the 14th century, and later plague outbreaks. The Liverpool Street Station excavation was particularly significant. Workers uncovered the Bedlam Burial Ground, which served as a cemetery for the notorious Bethlehem Royal Hospital from 1247 to 1738. Archaeologists eventually recovered the remains of over 3,000 individuals, many of whom had been patients at the mental hospital. These discoveries weren't just archaeologically significant, they created major logistical challenges for the transit system. Construction had to be halted, while archaeologists carefully excavated and documented the remains. The process took years and cost millions of pounds, but it provided unprecedented insights into medieval London life, disease, and social attitudes toward mental illness. Subway construction in New York has revealed layers of the city's pre-European history that most residents never think about. During construction of the Times Square 42nd Street Station complex, workers discovered Native American artifacts dating back over 800 years, indicating that the area was a significant settlement site long before European colonization. More recently, construction of the 2nd Avenue subway line uncovered artifacts from 18th and 19th century New York, including remnants of the city's original water system, colonial-era buildings, and everyday objects that provide insights into how ordinary New Yorkers lived before the modern era. Perhaps most intriguingly, subway construction has occasionally uncovered tunnels and structures that don't appear in any historical records. In 2013, workers extending a subway line in Brooklyn discovered a sealed chamber containing 19th century artifacts and what appeared to be the remains of an Underground Railroad safe house. The discovery suggested that New York's role in helping enslaved people escape to freedom was more extensive than previously documented. If you want to talk about archaeological complexity, Rome's subway system takes the prize. The city has been continuously occupied for over 2,500 years, which means that digging anywhere inevitably uncovers multiple layers of history: ancient Roman, medieval, Renaissance, and modern. Construction of Rome's Metro C line has been particularly productive for archaeologists. Workers have discovered ancient Roman military barracks, medieval churches, Renaissance palaces, and countless artifacts spanning 2 millennia. The project has become as much an archaeological excavation as a transportation construction project. The most spectacular discovery was a complete ancient Roman military complex beneath what is now the San Giovanni station. The site included barracks, training areas, and storage facilities that provided insights into how the Roman army organized urban garrisons. The discovery was so significant that the station design had to be completely revised to preserve and display the archaeological remains. Paris subway construction has revealed hidden chapters of the city's revolutionary history. During construction of Line 14, workers discovered extensive tunnels and chambers that had been used during the French Revolution, including secret meeting spaces, document storage areas, and what appeared to be hiding places for revolutionary leaders. More intriguingly, construction has uncovered evidence of the extensive quarry system that underlies much of Paris. These quarries, which provided stone for building the city above, were later adapted for various purposes, including mushroom farming, wine storage, and, during World War II, resistance operations and civilian shelter. The relationship between Paris's subway system and these pre-existing underground spaces creates a complex three-dimensional puzzle that city planners are still trying to fully understand. Some subway tunnels inadvertently connect to quarry systems, creating unintended passages that don't appear on any official maps. Perhaps the most intriguing discoveries are tunnels and spaces that don't correspond to any known historical construction projects. Every major city has stories of subway workers discovering sealed passages, abandoned chambers, or tunnel systems that can't be explained by official historical records. Some of these discoveries have mundane explanations. They're remnants of forgotten utility projects, abandoned construction attempts, or unofficial modifications made by previous generations of workers. But others remain genuinely mysterious, suggesting that cities have hidden histories that weren't properly documented or were intentionally concealed. In Berlin, subway construction has occasionally uncovered tunnels that don't match records from any known historical period, not medieval, not 19th century, not from either World War. Some urban historians speculate that these might be remnants of Cold War-era construction projects that remain classified, while others wonder if they represent even earlier, undocumented phases of the city's development. Here's something that might surprise you. Subway tunnel systems have become unique ecological environments that support their own distinct communities of plants, animals, and microorganisms. These underground ecosystems represent fascinating examples of how life adapts to human-created environments. Subway tunnels create environmental conditions that don't exist anywhere else on Earth. Constantly warm temperatures, high humidity, artificial lighting on predictable schedules, and protection from weather and seasonal variation. Over time, these conditions have attracted and shaped unique biological communities. In New York's subway system, scientists have identified over 15,000 different species of bacteria, many of which are found nowhere else on Earth. These bacterial communities have adapted to feed on the specific materials found in subway environments: metal dust from train brakes, organic compounds from human skin and breath, and chemical residues from cleaning products. More surprisingly, the subway has become habitat for numerous plant and animal species. Rats are the most obvious example, but subway tunnels also support populations of mice, cockroaches, crickets, and various species of spiders and beetles that have adapted to the underground environment. Perhaps most remarkably, several plant species have successfully colonized subway environments, despite the limited natural light. These plants typically grow near station entrances or ventilation shafts, where they can access some sunlight, but some have adapted to survive on artificial lighting alone. The London Underground supports populations of several fern species that grow in the humid conditions near tunnel walls. Some of these ferns have developed unusual characteristics: different leaf patterns, altered reproductive cycles, and modified root systems that appear to be adaptations to the underground environment. In Paris, botanists have discovered that certain moss species, growing in metro tunnels, have developed the ability to photosynthesize under artificial lighting conditions, essentially evolving to use subway lighting as their primary energy source. These mosses represent a form of evolution happening in real time, driven by human infrastructure. Let's talk about rats, because they're probably the most successful subway colonizers on the planet. Urban rat populations aren't just living alongside subway systems. They've developed complex societies that parallel human urban organization. New York subway rats have developed distinct territorial behaviors, with different rat communities controlling specific stations or tunnel sections. These communities have their own social hierarchies, communication systems, and resource-sharing arrangements. Some populations have become so adapted to subway life that they rarely venture above ground. More fascinatingly, subway rat populations show evidence of rapid evolution. Rats living in different subway systems have developed different characteristics, size variations, coat colors, and behavioral patterns that appear to be adaptations to their specific underground environments. In essence, different subway systems are creating different evolutionary pressures that are producing distinct rat subspecies. The chemical environment of subway tunnels has created unique conditions that affect both biological and non-biological processes. The combination of metal particles from train operation, cleaning chemicals, human biological residues, and groundwater creates chemical conditions that don't exist anywhere else. These conditions have led to the formation of unusual mineral deposits on tunnel walls, some of which have been found to have interesting properties for materials science research. More intriguingly, the chemical environment appears to be accelerating certain types of bacterial evolution, creating new strains of bacteria that can process heavy metals, synthetic chemicals, and other substances found in subway environments. Subway tunnel air isn't just stale. It's a complex atmospheric environment that reveals secrets about urban life above ground. The air in subway tunnels contains trace elements that reflect everything happening in the city above: industrial pollution, seasonal pollen patterns, traces of cooking from restaurants, and even evidence of illegal drug use. Scientists have begun using subway tunnel air as a kind of urban atmospheric archive, analyzing air samples to understand historical patterns of city life. Ice core samples tell us about ancient climates. Subway air samples tell us about the hidden rhythms of modern urban life. In some cities, subway tunnel air quality has actually become better than street-level air quality, particularly during periods of heavy traffic or industrial pollution above ground. This has led to the somewhat ironic situation where going underground actually provides cleaner air than staying on the surface. Subway tunnels have become canvases, galleries, and performance spaces for underground artistic communities that exist outside official cultural institutions. This underground art world represents some of the most innovative and authentic creative expression in modern cities. Modern graffiti culture was essentially born in subway tunnels. In the 1970s and 1980s, New York's subway system became the canvas for a generation of young artists who transformed train cars and tunnel walls into moving galleries. This wasn't just random vandalism, it was a sophisticated artistic movement with its own techniques, aesthetics, and social hierarchies. Graffiti writers developed complex systems for claiming territory, sharing techniques, and establishing reputations within their community. They created new artistic styles, wild-style lettering, character work, and whole car pieces that influenced mainstream art and design. The technical challenges of creating art in subway tunnels, working in darkness, avoiding transit security, dealing with moving trains and electrical hazards, pushed artists to develop innovative techniques and tools. Many traditional art supplies don't work in humid, dirty, dangerous environments, so graffiti writers became inventors as well as artists, creating new types of paint, markers, and application techniques. Subway tunnels have incredible acoustic properties that musicians have been exploiting for decades. The long, enclosed spaces create natural reverb and echo effects that can make even simple performances sound dramatic and atmospheric. But beyond busking in stations, some musicians have discovered that abandoned subway tunnels make excellent unauthorized concert venues. These spaces offer unique acoustics, dramatic visual environments, and the thrill of performing in forbidden territory. In the 1980s, several punk and experimental music bands in New York began staging secret concerts in abandoned subway stations. These performances became legendary within alternative music communities, combining the danger and excitement of urban exploration with cutting-edge musical performance. London's abandoned underground stations have similarly become venues for underground music events, art installations, and performance pieces. The combination of historical architecture, atmospheric lighting, and the inherent drama of the underground environment creates unique opportunities for artistic expression. What started as subway graffiti has evolved into sophisticated street art movements that use subway infrastructure as both canvas and gallery space. Modern street artists have moved beyond simple tagging to create complex installations, multimedia pieces, and temporary exhibitions in subway spaces. Some cities have embraced this evolution, creating official programs that commission street artists to create murals and installations in subway stations. Stockholm's subway system is famous for its extensive public art program, with over 100 stations featuring work by different artists. These stations have become tourist destinations in their own right. But the most interesting work often happens in the spaces between official and unofficial, artists who work with tacit permission from transit authorities, creating temporary installations that exist in legal gray areas. These artists often use abandoned or underutilized subway spaces as experimental galleries where they can test new techniques and concepts. Subway tunnels have become subjects and venues for a sophisticated underground photography movement. These photographers document not just the visual aesthetics of subway spaces, but also the hidden communities, forgotten architecture, and urban decay that exists within transit systems. Urban exploration photography has developed its own aesthetic and technical standards. Photographing in subway tunnels requires specialized equipment to deal with low light conditions, unusual color temperatures from artificial lighting, and the technical challenges of capturing moving subjects in confined spaces. Some of the most compelling urban photography happens in subway systems because these spaces embody urban contradictions: beauty and decay, public and private, visible and hidden. Photographers have documented everything from the architectural details of abandoned stations to the improvised living spaces of tunnel communities, to the natural beauty that emerges when plants colonize artificial environments. Perhaps the most ambitious underground art involves unauthorized architectural modifications to subway spaces. Artists and activists have created unauthorized installations that transform the function and meaning of subway infrastructure. These interventions range from simple modifications, adding unauthorized seating, lighting, or decorative elements, to complex installations that completely transform spaces. Some artists have created unauthorized gardens in abandoned stations, built temporary shelters for homeless individuals, or installed alternative lighting systems that reveal hidden architectural details. The most successful interventions work with rather than against the existing infrastructure, using the inherent qualities of subway spaces to create new possibilities for human interaction and experience. These projects often exist only temporarily before being discovered and removed by authorities, but they demonstrate possibilities for alternative uses of urban infrastructure. As we look toward the future, subway tunnels are becoming testing grounds for advanced technologies that could transform urban life. Some of these technologies are officially sanctioned research projects. Others exist in the gray areas between innovation and experimentation. One of the biggest secrets about modern subway systems is the extent of their digital infrastructure. Most major subway systems now carry more data than they carry passengers, with extensive fiber optic networks running through tunnels to support not just transit operations, but broader urban communication needs. These networks often extend far beyond what transit authorities officially acknowledge. In some cities, subway tunnel digital infrastructure carries internet traffic for entire neighborhoods, supports emergency communication systems, and provides backup connectivity for critical urban services. But here's where it gets interesting. Some of these digital networks have been extended by unauthorized users who have tapped into transit system infrastructure to create their own communication networks. Urban explorers, underground communities, and technology experimenters have created mesh networks, unauthorized Wi-Fi systems, and alternative communication channels that piggyback on official subway infrastructure. Subway tunnels are increasingly being used as testing environments for advanced transportation technologies that are still in development. The enclosed, controlled environment of subway tunnels makes them ideal for testing everything from autonomous train systems to new types of track technology. Several cities are experimenting with magnetic levitation technology in existing subway tunnels, testing whether these systems can be retrofitted into traditional rail infrastructure. Others are exploring hyperloop concepts, high-speed transportation in vacuum tubes, using subway tunnels as testing environments. Some of the most interesting experiments involve hybrid technologies that combine traditional rail transport with other systems. There are projects testing trains that can switch between traditional rails and magnetic levitation, systems that use compressed air for propulsion, and even experiments with underground cable car systems. Here's something you probably didn't expect. Subway tunnels are becoming sites for experimental urban agriculture projects. The consistent temperatures, controlled environments, and available space in some underground areas make them suitable for certain types of food production. In London, several entrepreneurs have established commercial mushroom farms in unused sections of underground tunnels. These operations take advantage of the naturally humid, temperature-controlled environment to grow specialty mushrooms for restaurant markets. More experimentally, some cities are testing hydroponic and aeroponic growing systems in subway environments, using artificial lighting and nutrient systems to grow vegetables and herbs underground. These projects represent potential solutions to urban food security challenges and demonstrate how existing infrastructure could be repurposed for multiple functions. Subway systems generate enormous amounts of waste energy, from train braking systems, heat from electrical operations, and air movement from train passage. Increasingly, cities are experimenting with technologies to capture and use this waste energy. Some of the most promising experiments involve installing energy capture systems in subway tunnels that generate electricity from train movement, airflow, and vibration. These systems could potentially make subway operations more energy efficient, while also contributing power to urban electrical grids. More ambitiously, some engineers are exploring whether subway tunnels could serve as massive battery storage systems for urban renewable energy projects. The idea is to install large-scale battery systems in unused tunnel spaces, using them to store energy from solar and wind systems for use during peak demand periods. Subway tunnels may become crucial components of urban climate adaptation strategies. These underground spaces maintain relatively stable temperatures year-round, making them potential refuges during extreme weather events caused by climate change. Several cities are exploring ways to use subway infrastructure as part of broader urban cooling systems, circulating air through tunnel networks to reduce surface temperatures during heat waves. Others are investigating whether subway spaces could serve as emergency shelter networks during extreme weather events. More speculatively, some urban planners are exploring whether subway systems could be expanded and modified to serve as alternative urban environments during periods when surface conditions become temporarily uninhabitable due to extreme heat, severe storms, or air quality emergencies. The enclosed, controlled environment of subway systems makes them ideal testing grounds for autonomous technologies and artificial intelligence systems. Several cities are experimenting with fully autonomous train operations, AI-powered maintenance systems, and intelligent infrastructure that can adapt to changing conditions automatically. But the most interesting experiments involve AI systems that extend beyond just running trains. There are projects testing AI systems that can monitor tunnel conditions, predict maintenance needs, optimize energy usage, and even detect unauthorized human presence in restricted areas. Some of these systems are beginning to operate with minimal human oversight, creating essentially autonomous underground environments that manage themselves. While this offers possibilities for more efficient and responsive infrastructure, it also raises questions about human control over urban environments and the implications of AI-managed city systems. As we conclude tonight's journey through the secrets beneath subway tunnels, I want you to consider what we've discovered together. We've explored ghost stations that serve as underground museums, infrastructure networks that rival the complexity of the human nervous system, communities that have created alternative societies in forgotten spaces, government facilities that exist in the shadows of official maps, archaeological discoveries that rewrite urban history, ecological systems that evolution is creating in real time, artistic movements that have transformed global culture, and technological experiments that may define the future of urban living. What emerges from all these stories is a picture of subway systems as more than just transportation infrastructure. They're urban laboratories where human creativity, adaptability, and ingenuity play out in ways that surface-level city planning never anticipates. The subway tunnel represents a unique space in human civilization. It's simultaneously public and private, visible and hidden, planned and improvised. These contradictions make subway systems incubators for innovation, creativity, and social experimentation that wouldn't be possible anywhere else. Consider the homeless communities that developed their own governance systems in abandoned tunnels. These weren't just survival strategies. They were experiments in alternative social organization that offered insights into human community building under extreme conditions. Urban planners and sociologists are still studying these communities to understand how people create order, meaning, and mutual support in environments that weren't designed for human habitation. Or think about the graffiti artists who developed entirely new artistic techniques because they were working in environments that traditional art supplies couldn't handle. Their innovations influenced not just street art, but graphic design, fashion, and digital media. The subway tunnel forced artistic innovation in ways that conventional galleries never could. Despite all our exploration today, the truth is that subway systems continue to surprise us. Every year, construction workers, urban explorers, and maintenance crews discover new spaces, forgotten infrastructure, and unexpected communities that exist beneath our feet. Part of this is simple scale. These systems are so large and complex that no single person or organization has complete knowledge of them. But part of it is also the nature of urban development itself. Cities are living systems that grow, change, and adapt in ways that formal planning can never fully control or predict. The secrets we've discussed tonight will be joined by new secrets tomorrow. As cities evolve, as technologies develop, and as human needs change, subway systems will continue to be adapted, abandoned, and rediscovered in ways we can't anticipate. Looking forward, the lessons from subway tunnel secrets have important implications for how we think about urban planning and city development. The underground represents both opportunity and challenge for future cities. On one hand, the extensive underground infrastructure that already exists in most major cities represents enormous potential for adaptation and expansion. Climate change, population growth, and technological development will require cities to make more efficient use of three-dimensional space, and subway systems provide existing infrastructure that could support new functions. We're already seeing experiments in using subway spaces for urban agriculture, energy storage, emergency shelter, and alternative transportation systems. As surface space becomes more crowded and more expensive, the underground will become increasingly valuable for functions beyond transportation. On the other hand, the hidden communities, unofficial economies, and informal social systems that develop in subway spaces remind us that urban planning can never fully control how people actually use city infrastructure. Any future development of underground space will need to account for the human tendency to adapt, modify, and appropriate urban environments in unexpected ways. The stories we've explored tonight also raise important ethical questions about urban development, social responsibility, and who has the right to urban space. When cities allow communities to form in abandoned infrastructure, are they providing de facto housing policy or shirking their responsibility to address homelessness through official channels? When governments build classified transportation networks, are they providing essential security infrastructure or creating unnecessary divisions between official and public urban space? When artists create unauthorized installations in subway spaces, are they enhancing urban culture or damaging public infrastructure? These aren't questions with simple answers, but they're questions that become more important as cities grow larger and more complex. The underground spaces we've discussed tonight exist in legal, social, and ethical gray areas that formal urban governance struggles to address effectively. I want to conclude with a word of caution balanced with encouragement. The stories we've explored tonight might inspire some of you to want to explore these spaces yourselves. That's understandable. There's something deeply appealing about discovering hidden aspects of the cities we live in. But remember that most of these spaces are dangerous, legally restricted, or both. The reason they contain secrets is often that they're not designed for casual human access. Electrified rails, moving trains, structural instability, poor air quality, and legal consequences are all real risks associated with unauthorized exploration of subway infrastructure. That said, there are legitimate ways to explore these spaces. Many cities offer official tours of abandoned stations, behind-the-scenes looks at infrastructure, and educational programs that provide access to spaces that are normally off-limits. Urban exploration communities also emphasize safety, legal compliance, and respect for infrastructure and communities they encounter. The goal isn't to discourage curiosity about these spaces, but to channel that curiosity in directions that are safe and responsible. The underground world is fascinating, but it's also genuinely dangerous for unprepared explorers. So as you leave here tonight and eventually take your next subway ride, I want you to remember what we've discussed. As your train moves through those tunnels, consider the layers of history, infrastructure, community, and possibility that exist just beyond those tunnel walls. Think about the ghost stations your train might be passing, the utility networks that keep your city functioning, the communities that have found ways to create homes in impossible spaces, the government facilities that exist in the shadows of official maps, the archaeological treasures waiting to be discovered, the ecological experiments that evolution is conducting in real time, the artistic traditions that were born in these spaces, and the technological innovations that might transform how we live in cities. Most importantly, remember that cities are not just the official, visible, mapped spaces that appear in tourist guides and city planning documents. Cities are also the hidden spaces, the forgotten places, the unofficial communities, and the improvised solutions that develop when human creativity encounters urban infrastructure. The subway tunnel is a perfect metaphor for urban life itself. It's simultaneously planned and spontaneous, public and private, functional and mysterious, mundane and magical. Understanding the secrets beneath subway tunnels helps us understand the secrets of city life itself. Perhaps the most important insight from tonight's exploration is that the underground world of subway tunnels serves as a kind of mirror for urban society itself. The communities that form in tunnel spaces reflect the inequalities and social challenges of the cities above. The artistic movements that emerge from underground spaces often represent authentic cultural expressions that official cultural institutions struggle to recognize or support. The infrastructure networks that run beneath our feet mirror the complexity and interconnectedness of urban life above ground. The government facilities that exist in classified spaces reflect the security concerns and power structures that shape urban governance. The archaeological discoveries reveal the layers of history that underlie contemporary urban development. In other words, the secrets beneath subway tunnels aren't really separate from the life of the city above. They're integral parts of urban systems that we usually choose not to see or think about. Understanding these underground secrets helps us understand the visible city more completely. Cities are far more complex, creative, and mysterious than most people realize. The next time someone tells you that urban life is sterile, predictable, or controlled, tell them about the communities that create alternative societies in abandoned subway tunnels, the artists who develop new cultural movements in underground spaces, the ecological systems that evolve in artificial environments, and the technological innovations that emerge from the intersection of human creativity and urban infrastructure. The secrets beneath subway tunnels remind us that human cities are among the most complex, creative, and dynamic systems that our species has ever created. Even in the most planned, controlled, and regulated urban environments, human ingenuity finds ways to create surprise, beauty, community, and possibility in the most unexpected places. And that, class, is perhaps the most important secret of all. That cities, like the people who create them, are far more interesting, resilient, and creative than they appear on the surface. The subway tunnel is just one window into that larger truth about urban life. Thank you for joining me on this journey underground. For your assignment this week, I want you to pay attention to the infrastructure around you, not just subway tunnels, but all the hidden systems that keep your daily life functioning. See if you can spot the edges of the hidden city that exists alongside the visible one. And remember, every time you step onto a subway platform, you're standing at the entrance to one of the most complex, mysterious, and fascinating human-created environments on Earth. Most of its secrets are still waiting to be discovered. Good night. And in case you've enjoyed our evening talk so much and still might be awake, here is another educational video for you.